Most of us, most of us have had some geodesign experience. Some of us have had a lot. Some have had none, which makes it an awkward thing to organize because I'm going to go through some very basic ideas, which are familiar to some of you, but new to some of you, but that's the way it is. But the way that makes this new for most of us is that it's purposely being set up to maximize the complexity of being in different places. And this is one of 3 workshops. Actually, Michele and Rishi and I have already given 2 workshop meetings this morning and this afternoon. This is the 3rd for us. The fact of the matter is that many global universities, many American universities, I'm in London, I'm living in London, Rishi's in Dublin, Michele's in Italy, but we just went through with a workshop with the European colleagues, and many of the European colleagues, like Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, Oxford, UCL, where I'm now, everybody is teaching over the internet, at least in the fall, and many schools have already committed themselves to not opening to human beings in the fall, and maybe not even for the entire year. So this is very serious. And those of us who are teaching studios, or even engineering, or even in the sciences, where projects have to be taught collaboratively, have a real problem. And that is, you need a software structure that supports a workflow which does what you want to do. All right? So we set up these 3 workshops. The 3 of us, we taught 2 of them last week for the Digital Landscape Architecture Conference. And now we're doing 3 of them for the International Geodesign Collaboration. And if this turns out to be useful, great. Join the collaboration, use the software, use the assumptions. If it turns out not to be useful, too bad. You've wasted 7 hours of your life, which is not a lot. Now, in the last 2 weeks, we've learned a lot, and we've actually changed the way we've been running the workshops. Now, Rishi, I need to say, I taught collaborative workshops over the internet 22 years ago and 21 years ago. One with Germany, my Harvard students and a German colleague, and the next one with Mexico City. And it was very difficult. It was painful for the students. They would get a response a day later to a question that was an immediate question. It just didn't work. But now the technology does work. And when Rishi invented Geodesign Hub, which derived from his thesis, but is a totally different software now, it was designed and tested as he was a graduate student in a workshop where we had 13 people in 10 countries, ranging from Boston to Kyoto. And we did it live, and we just ran it live. So we knew that it would work. Rishi knew that it would work. And he's run he's run out of Dublin many workshops. The software has been used hundreds of times. And I've taught projects, and many of you have as well, using it. So what's different now is we're learning some things about working on the internet in a collaborative manner. We've learned, for example, that you need to have software which lets the group meet as a whole and that has breakout rooms. And next week when we meet, we're going to meet both as teams privately and publicly. The second thing you can't clap your hands and yell, everybody stop. You can't do that. So you need to have a structure that has very firm time limits where you control it and you just turn off the computers and make everybody get together. And some people don't like that. They want to do things at their own pace. But if they do things at their own pace in a collaboration and one person is late, you only have 2 choices. Make everybody late or kick that person out. Those are your choices. And so your students and you and your colleagues and you and your collaborators and you have to have a very, very different teaching psychology and structure And the rules have to be your rules. It's not a democracy. It isn't a democracy. And I'm going to, as a friend, I know many of you, we're friends. But when we meet next week, I'm going to be setting the rules. And I'm going to be setting them sensitive to how Rishi and Michele and I watch what you're doing. And I'm perfectly willing to relax midstream. But you'll see how the psychology of working remotely is very different from the psychology of working 1-in-1 and 1-in-5 and 1-in-15 in a normal class. The same friendly style has to be transformed into a respectful style. That's my experience, and I've had a lot of it. But I warn you, it's not the same. Your relationship isn't the same. Now, this is what we're planning on doing. Today, it'll take us 2 hours. I'm going to give a general introduction to what we're doing, why and how. Then some combination of either Rishi or I will go through the software and its fundamental reasons for being what it is. Then Michele, whose city we're going to be working on, is going to be showing you the assumptions and Cagliari and how we're organizing the workshop. And it's very clear, it should be clear to everybody, none of us, except maybe me and maybe Rishi and certainly Michele, know the city. So we're not dealing with a real problem. We're not dealing with the right people. We're playing at making a plan, but we're going through the major steps of what you would do if you were making a real plan. We're taking a group of people, none of whom knows everything, and we're trying to pool our skill and knowledge, faulty though it is, in making what looks like a credible plan for a city of 500,000 people that's growing reasonably middle, not too fast and not too slow, but it's changing dramatically due to technological changes and social changes. And so we shouldn't spend a lot of time agonizing over the decisions we have to make. We should make them and get on with it. The other thing that's going to be very clear after we understand a little bit about Cagliari and the assumptions is we're going to go into this, what we call the sandbox. The sandbox is a setup that mimics the real project, but it allows us to make stupid mistakes and to learn how to make diagrams and edit diagrams and make a plan. So everybody, by the end of today, before the 2 hours are gone, you will have made several diagrams and seen how you transform them into a design and remove them from a design. Then I'm going to ask the 8 coordinators after the workshop to contact their team members, everybody has a list, and to have everybody make 2 or 3 diagrams so that every team makes a set of at least 10 diagrams in the real project, which we will use as the initial ideas to make the first version of our designs. I'll summarize all of this at the end of the session. Meanwhile, there's no need to take notes. The PowerPoint, which I'm going to use to structure the introduction, will be mailed, a link to it will be mailed to everybody who's here immediately after the workshop ends. In addition, Rishi is going to record the entire session, and that will eventually be a link that will be sent to everybody on, it'll be a YouTube link. So just pay attention. You'll be listening to a group of us. We'll be able to answer questions at the end. And our intention is to leave within 2 hours from my starting position. Any questions at this point? How many people, Michele, how many people do we have here? We should be 25 plus you and me and Rishi. So we
are 24 in total.
So we're missing 2 or 3 people. If it turns out that one of the coordinators or 2 of them are absent, which can happen, there's all kinds of reasons for this. then somebody on each team needs to contact the other people on the team. But we do need the diagrams before we begin the workshop next week.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's,
Christine, W-A-C-T-A, is that Christine?
just a minute, Christine Vakta. Christine
Oh,
Vakta,
yeah. Another Christine, okay.
Christina said she was going to join a little bit late.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, sorry. I said that Christina, I just texted with her. She said she's going to join a little bit late.
She's here. She's in my lower right-hand corner. Christina Vakta, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Good.
No,
So-
but Christina Hill,
oh,
who's
Christina
a
Hill.
different Christina that we were talking about earlier,
So-
said she was going to join a little bit late.
Okay, she knows but she knows what she's doing, and she'll be fine in that role. I hope she does, because I'll summarize everything at the end anyway. All right, let's begin. Michaeli, I need to share my screen.
You can?
I have you as the host disabling participant screen sharing.
Oh, sorry.
Meanwhile, I'm in London in absolute quarantine, and it's getting dark. It's almost the longest day of the year. Very strange. Okay? No, I'm still disabled, Michaeli.
Cannot find it.
It should be in the below where it says share screen. I think it gives you options
Okay,
to.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Do you have it, Michaeli?
Okay, should be okay now.
Okay.
Again, please.
I need to share my screen, and where's this one that I want? Where's the one that I want? Oh, damn it.
Go to a screen 1 or 2 if you have a, because it's
Just a minute, just a minute. I want to go to this slide. I want to go to this slide. Can you see my slide yet?
no.
Not yet?
Then I need to go back into Zoom. I need to share my screen. I need to go to this slide.
Okay,
Now-
coming. Yeah,
Coming.
Okay,
perfect.
okay, now I need to make it bigger. And now I need to get rid of all your nice faces. And then need to go back. Okay. What's the generic problem? The generic problem is not designing a house and garden. And it's not making a design for the globe, although that's a necessary task. It's basically, the generic problem applies to this middle range from a very large multi-use, multi-system project to a city or a town expanding with agricultural and hydrological issues, to a large watershed or a region with many cities, many settlements, many issues. That middle range is what this exercise is really aiming at. The generic problem is, how do we organize? And the word organize is really important. The word organize means that this is not a one-person design task. It's too big, it's too complicated. Nobody in the world knows enough now to do a project this big by him or herself. And to conduct, you need a workflow management process to conduct a project like this, because if it's a collaboration, people need to know their expectations, their tasks, and their deadlines. The very beginning and strategic stages. The theory is that if the beginning is wrong, the problem is likely to be badly met. Strategic means think about the complicated big issues before you think about the details. It's not bottoms up, and it's not top down. It's multi-scale at the same time. Of designing means intentionally changing. We're not trying to forecast. We're not trying to predict. We're trying to change what is being predicted and forecast for something that's better. It's Simon's definition of intentional change for longer term. Longer term could be forever, but no, we're thinking about 30 years, 2 generations. you can get people to change for their grandchildren, but you can't really easily do longer. Change, meaning not based on today, in a large, multi-system, multi-client and contentious context. Multi-client means there's no dictator, there's no king. It's a political process with competing, argumentative clients who cannot agree on a set of goals that are meaningful. The goals that they might agree on are motherhood, God, whatever, but they don't really gain much traction in terms of what to do. So you need a different process, one which should not become a zero-sum game. A zero-sum game is when one idea set wins, and everybody else loses. What you want at the end is a negotiated design in which everybody walks away with enough not to walk away. And this is very frequently the normal situation for important and complex projects and studies. Now, when you have a project like this, there are two very common ways of attacking it, two very common ways that governments and corporations and people attack such a project. The first is to commission a company or a government agency or an individual sometimes to make a study. And what you have is a bunch of people who disagree. That's why they have these little different colors. And a team is organized by somebody, whether it's in a company, a government, but there's usually a coordinator. Sometimes it's more than a coordinator, which is a management task. Sometimes it's a commander-in-chief, which this is not. And they make a design, and they make one or two or three designs. And at some point, somebody presents it to the client group, which is normally more than one person, who a city council, a ministry, whatever. And that city council or ministry will have information about the design, the relative importance of the goals, the design itself, whether it met the program, what the impacts were, what the costs were. And the problem with this approach is they'll never know if there's a better design, if they had asked somebody else. They'll never know. And I have many friends and many former students who are in this role, and they do their best, but the client never knows if that's really the best possible solution that could have been done. So many countries, especially in Europe, and many political bodies, many public bodies, would do this by either invited or open competition. In Europe, it's very frequently an open competition. In America, it's more often an invited competition. And so either a large company would have different teams, or different companies or consultants might each produce a team. And they're each now going to produce a different design based on their interpretation of the client's objectives. And they present it to the clients. And the clients will frequently have information about the 6 designs in my example. And they might say in a first meeting, we like 3 of them, the rest of you go home. So 3 of the teams, or 9 of the teams, or 50 of the teams stop, and 3 of them go forward. And then they have a second meeting. They have a second design and a second meeting. And now they have to come to an agreement, and they pick the 5th design. But they realize, because of the distribution of which design is best, one design has the best set of objectives. One has the nicest plan according to them. One has met the program the best. A different one has the least impacts, and then another one has the cheapest one. And what frequently happens, they pick this one, but they tell them, talk to these people and take some of their ideas, because it's almost always the case that the finalists have some better ideas than the winner. It's very, very common. So this is a process that never ends, because they have to fight with their competitors. And maybe they agree and maybe they don't. And so what we do is we do some things that are very different in collaborative negotiation. First of all, we say the final design has to be an agreement. It's not a zero-sum game. So we were going to begin with the idea that all information is public information. There are no private ideas. And we start with a design on behalf of each client group. The red people will have a red design. The yellow people will have a yellow design. The blue people will have a blue design. And those designs are first made as well as you can by a team of people. But in the second version of the design, they start to look at what other people are doing and taking better ideas than they came up with themselves. So the ideas begin to be informally shared. And by the time they're finished with their third or fourth design, they can talk to other teams and say, we think we would like to work with you, either because you're similar to us or because you're symbiotic with us. We've been really good at development and you've been really good at conservation. So let's take your best parts and our best parts because they're different from each other and get them together. And then let's build a structured negotiation. These and these, then their design this way, then their design this way, and let's see if we can negotiate a final design. And so the software that we're using is organized for this kind of a process. It may not work in every case, but it's been pretty robust in an awfully large variety of cases by culture, economic development level, geography, climate, type of problem. There's been a lot of them. And the reason it works is because everybody is part of the process, including the people of the place. We're not designing for them, we're designing with them. It makes a big difference. You need a framework. It doesn't have to be the one that I've written about. It really doesn't, but you absolutely need one because you need to organize the process as a series of steps, especially if it's in a remote environment. It's really, really important. I observe that. And I'm saying it, you may not find it to be true, but I think it's really true. And it's designed to be collaborative, which means that when the information in the system is public, you can figure out who did it because we keep track of that. But when an idea comes up, it's anybody's idea being given by anybody and being taken by anybody. So nobody should ever say, that's a bad idea, because it might be a good idea to somebody. It may not be used by anybody else, and you want your ideas to be used by other people. In a negotiation, the final design will be by the designs of diagrams of policies and projects that other people have adopted happily. So keeping things private is the last thing that you want to do. You want to let people know what the ideas that you have are. And the reason you need a framework is when you make a mistake, you can go back. That's the single most important thing. The second most important thing is to be able to tell people where they are at any given time. You can stop the project at a particular time and go right back to the same place with the same task. The organizational structure is really important. There are about a dozen important frameworks in the world. There really are. Peter Rowe has written a very good book and papers on this. Other people have as well. Mine seems to be useful, but it's not the only one. But you do need one. Now, the synthesis stage is the third action of making the study. And this workshop is going to focus on the assumption that you can make your own project, you can specify your own models and your own methods, but you still then have to end up making one or more designs. And it's that task which I'm most interested in, and the thing that we're going to be discussing in this workshop. I can tell you that it's very different when you're working remotely and you're working with diagrams. And we're going to discuss, when we get together next week, several strategies of how you attack the kind of problem that we're building and the kind of information structure. It has several characteristics. First of all, synthesis is an iterative process. I will show you later that your third or fourth design will be the best one you can make, most likely. The first is never, and I mean the word never, going to be the best design. And the sequence is iterative so that you can improve not only by your own work, but by borrowing work from other teams. And the sequence of synthesis matters. It really matters what you do first, because what you do first guides what you do second. And if you get the earliest moves wrong, the chances are that the project itself will not go well. And this is what makes geodesign a complex and dynamic process. The dynamic means the thing is changing as you design. There are about 10 different characteristics. The problems are complicated with at least 10 systems, and each of them has representation, meaning data. But the data is not necessarily colored or maps. It could be stories. It could be anything. It could be music. It could be any medium, but it's data. It needs process models. How do the systems work? It needs evaluation models. Where are the good locations and things to do? There are many ways to change and improve a system. Let's assume there are 10 different ways. If there are 10 systems and 10 different ways, that means we need about 100 diagrams of policies and projects which we can make into a design. Each of these ways is a diagram of a policy or project. The diagram is important. I'll explain that a little more later, but really, it's not intended to be precise. It's intended to be a general statement of location and relationship to other diagrams. A policy is a guideline. It's a legislative or somehow promulgated guideline. A project is actually something to be built, which has tangible impacts. A policy can have impacts, but they're intangible, mostly intangible. These can be drawn, they can be partial, they can be GIS derived. You'll see some they go right from GIS into the system. They could be rule-based and smart. Number 4, there are many ways of synthesis, of making a design. Some are more effective than others, depending on scale, type, size, time, skill, technology, cooperation. We'll talk about those. A design is a relationship in space and time of sets of system changes. We're not going to work one diagram at a time. We're going to work in groups of diagrams at a time. All changes feed back to update, representation, process, and evaluation models. If you make a change, the computer knows, and if you want to see the effect, you can see the effect on your evaluation model. Each change has impacts across all systems. If you have an agricultural land and you build housing, you're preventing it from being industry. So the change is a change on itself, on what was there before, and what else could have happened. There are opportunity costs, which are impacts. Changes can be based on different decision models or priorities, alternative scenarios, sensitivity assessments to assumptions, and there can be 6 or more in any geodesign study. It's very rare that there's only one design in a geodesign study. It's probably a very bad practice. At a minimum, there should be 2. What happens if nothing changes, and what happens if something changes? Without the no change, you'll have no idea what the benefit or cost of your study is. And these alternatives have to be compared and negotiated. And usually, but not always, one design must evolve. And the word evolve is really important because it evolves through negotiation. And it needs to be then selected for proposed action. It might evolve, but then not be approved by your client. Those things happen in the world. And anything that gets actually changed in the future updates automatically, should automatically update your data, your process, and your evaluation models, because that iteration occurs every generation. Every place that I know has been studied more than once. Almost every generation studies almost everything. So it's a live process that goes on over time. It's not, let's make a plan and that's the finish. But that's not how the world works. Now it needs a workflow. It needs a workflow so that you know what tasks are going on. And the framework book that I wrote is based on the workflow that I taught in for 50 years. It's based on my theories and methods course. And it's basically full of questions that are related to these different 6 kinds of models. So you have a group, it decides to do a study, it gets the people who know the most to organize information, design a process model, assess the locational evaluation and benefit of for each system. Then we're going to change a place that has a history, it has things that are happening, it has alternatives, and we have to work our way selecting alternatives to make a design. We have to look at their impacts and we have to decide, have we done a good job? Yes, no, or maybe. And if it's maybe or no, we either have to change scale or feedback to get better data, change the model maybe, reevaluate the criteria, but we're going to be changing the design. You can also mitigate the impacts, and eventually you have to present something for review and decision. Now, different sizes of project have different characteristics. For example, if I'm the architect of a house, the client is telling me what the client wants. I presume, maybe not. And there's a high level of certainty. In this middle scale, because it's a contentious circumstance, because people don't agree, there's a high level of uncertainty, and you need a method that retains uncertainty until it's negotiated. And up here at the global scale, you may know the rules, and you may use a rule-based or an optimizing or an agent-based model, but you don't have a sense at the beginning what the outcome will be. In the certainty level, you know what the outcome might be very quickly. In the uncertainty, it's a slow process. And at the global level, you actually don't know what the outcome will be. And so there are different methods for attacking. At the smallest project, it works perfectly well to make a serial sketch. And you can always change it. You make 1, you make 2, you make 3, but you don't make 20 usually. At the global level, you can make a rule and mathematical model, and it jumps right to the design. And you can change the design. But you can also change the rules and do a sensitivity analysis on the rules, and you could do a sensitivity analysis on the mathematical model. But in this middle ground, where you're looking at strategy, it works that systems-based diagrams and groups of diagrams put together really work well, because you can change the diagrams very rapidly. And we've experimented with this. Many of you know this, that we ran a workshop in which different, very experienced teams used the same assumptions about Redlands, California, for a transit-oriented development and for a landscape open space system for the entire city. And we found that different methods work better at different scales. Some got better as the project got bigger, and some got worse as the project got bigger. And we found consistently that the 3rd or 4th design was the best design, and the 5th and the 6th got worse. And the 3rd designs are usually the best ones, maybe the 4th. And in the workshop next week, we're going to try to do 3 designs for each of the teams. The first will never be the best. And so we have some hypothesis that if you're designing for a house, these are the techniques, and this is the level of analysis you really need to do. And if you're working for the globe, you better be optimizing rule-based or agent-based. But in this middle level, where many, many important projects, in fact, most important projects occur, you need this middle range of constraining, not sequential, of constraining and combinatorial, and both horizontally and hierarchically modeled processes. And there's a paper on that subject that is cited. And why do we use diagrams? Well, because both sciences and design professions use them a lot. We teach in diagrams. We teach in general principles that are not precise. Most of these don't have scale. They don't have size, but they express relationship in space and sometimes in time. And when you're dealing with a strategy, that's exactly what you want. You want a set of alternatives based on broad, reasonable, relatively true ideas. And Geodesign Hub, Rishi software, was designed to become a workflow in that middle range. And it does work really, really well for that kind of a problem. Rishi, are you with us?
I think Rishi is not in the room at the moment.
Okay, so I'm going to continue then describing his work. All right, first let me say something, maybe repeating about Rishi. Rishi is Indian. His father, he grew up in Japan, where he grew up as a child, teenager in Japan, where everything is done in groups and collaborative. It's the most collaborative society in the world. And then he went to University of Michigan as a mechanical engineer and to MIT as a mechanical engineer as master's. And he went to work for Honda in America, in Akron, and he was assigned to a team that had to design a screwdriver collaboratively. And so he got interested in that. Then he worked for several years in Dublin for Microsoft, matching industrial processes to Microsoft technology and developing industrial process technology, and decided to go for a PhD at the Center for Advanced Spatial Analysis, where I'm an honorary professor. I live in London, and I'm for the last dozen years, and I'm an honorary professor at the Center for Advanced Spatial Analysis at University College London, which is probably one of the 2 or 3 leading think tanks on spatial work. A lot of big data and social service processes. It's mainly PhDs and postdocs with now a large master's program, but it's mainly a research center. And he came to me after a lecture that I gave, and he came to me very simply and he said, I think I can do all of this digitally. And I said to him, I've thought that for 50 years. And so I became one of his advisors, and he was just brilliant. He produced in 6 months a working version of Geodesign Hub, which is now a totally different project, reinvented totally. But we ran a workshop 5 years ago with 13 people in 10 countries, ranging from Boston to Tokyo. It was in real time. It was on one design. It was excellent. Now Rishi owns a company. It's a one-person company. He does not sell his software. He rents it. And he gives access to it free to universities. And he helps people if they're in the International Geodesign Collaborative. So I urge those of you who are teaching here, who are not in the collaborative, to join it. We'll welcome you. We already have 150 schools sharing the same languages and some of the same assumptions. You're not obligated to use Geodesign Hub in the collaboration, but if you want to, it's very easy. Now, Rishi uses this slide and the reference to the introduction, which you've all already had the reference in the invitation. He matches my experience. Usually it takes, in a real project, about 3 months in advance to get people to clear their calendars. The actual work of organizing a study is about a month. You have to sort of know what you want to do. You have to define in a reasonable way the systems, the data that you need, the models. Doing the study itself is about anywhere from 10 to 20 hours, but it's best to spread it over a little bit of time. Doing it in 1 2-day consecutive meeting is a brutal experience. And the people who have the best arrangement are people who are teaching, who can get all their students together and let the students do all the work to get the project organized and do the project, which they need to know anyway. But that process over a 3-month period can be a really, really terrific semester of teaching. And you get something out of it by letting the students manage the process. And you guide them through it, but you actually don't teach as much as you guide them through it. The software itself internalizes the area marked in red. It's a human process. The people are outside. And the red box interacts seamlessly with any other software and software language. You can import data, operations, models, diagrams, and you can export data, operations, models, and diagrams. This interfaces with City Engine. You can bring GIS operations into it, although you can bring your data into it if you're already in a data structure. However, it also has, inside GeoDesign Hub, access to global data where you don't need to bring any new data in. It has access to a cost model built in Seattle, Washington. It has tools for negotiation and for synthesis, and it has global process and evaluation models, which generally are very simple. But the beauty of this process is it uses simple data in a very complicated way, rather than complicated data in a very simple way, which most people actually do. These are the preparation activities. And in this case, Michele and his team in Cagliari, Sardinia, have done this work. First of all, in the upper left-hand corner, there are 10 systems. Each has a color, and they're not of equal value. And you'll be assigned later in this presentation to a team which is hinted at what their priorities are. Then there's a study area. Oh, I need to say, these are the ways that basically that the IGC projects are organized. The project is organized in a square study area. There are reasons for that, but one of them is that the political boundary needs to know what's on the other side of the line of the boundary. So doing a square study area forces the people to think about what's the area we're responsible for, but what about the area we're not responsible for? Does it flood into our area? Do we send smoke into their area, etc.? Then relative to the size of the study area, this is the amount of land that has to be changed in the next 30 years, as developed by the government of the region of Cagliari. The amount of agriculture that has to be changed and modernized is enormous. Green infrastructure, a huge protection of landscape. Low-density housing, industry, high-tech, a new community for high-tech startups, energy, high-density housing, cultural protection. The evaluation models, all of them, you see them below for the systems, are all in the same language. That's really important. It's important so that, one, you can understand each other's maps, and two, you can overlay them and make meaningful assumptions. Red means that that system is already working well, leave it alone. Yellow means that those places are not appropriate for your activity. They may have the wrong soils, they may be hazardous, they may already be developed, they may be protected, for example. There are 3 levels of attractive sites. The lightest, 3 greens. The lightest green means this is a site which is capable of supporting your activity. Let's call it, for example, industry or low density housing or agriculture. Light yellow means it could go there. But it has no infrastructure, no road access. I need to go back. No road access, no electric access, no sewers, no nothing. It's just a piece of land. Middle green says it's capable, it could go there, and it does have infrastructure. It does. It has electricity, road access, etc. Dark green means it's capable, it's suitable, and there's a market in that location that people want that land use. And so all the maps that you see below are in those 5 colors, or fewer, but not more and not different. Then there's a set of models in which you can test the impact of your change on every other system, where purple means it's a beneficial and orange means it's a bad impact. And then there's a cost model. There's a cost model which is derived from actual numbers 3 or 4 years ago in Seattle, Washington, but you can make your own. I can also tell you that the software runs in almost every language, and in every currency and in every metric system. So even though most of you are American, we're going to run this workshop in metrics. So all the values for area are in hectares, roughly 2+ acres to a hectare. And it's going to be done in euros. But there's a button in the software that you can change to Portuguese, and you can change to Cruzeiros. So we're going to first look at the relative importance of models, then we're going to look at the evaluations, then we're going to teach you how to make diagrams. We're going to create teams. Next week, with making the diagrams as homework. Next week, we're going to organize the teams, make at least 2 or 3 versions, and negotiate to a final design. You know that you can deal with timelines, costs, and it'll jump into 3D if you need to or want to. And all aspects of every step that we're going to deal with can be made dynamic. And there are different ways to make the system immediately responsive if you've got more time. In a workshop, we can't do that for every step. It's impossible. But you need time to make it dynamic. Now, the collaborative rules, we're following the collaborative's rules. There are now 150 universities, and we've completed 96 projects. Those of you who are going to watch the ESRI user conference in July will know that Jack Dangermond is going to talk about the collaboration and the beginning ideas about doing some globally related studies. And it's something that several of us are very interested in. Because we're beginning to agree on how designs are expressed, we can begin to actually much more closely collaborate and compare designs. I can, for example, imagine an East Coast group and a West Coast group and a Brazilian Coast group, a European Coast group, a Japanese group, agreeing on designs that they can become bigger projects. We're thinking very hard about trying how to do that. These are the colors and the systems that we're going to be working with: water, agriculture, green infrastructure, energy, transport, industry, institutions, housing, and in this case, tourism and high-density housing. We're going to be dealing with an early adopter scenario, and the collaboration works within the United Nations sustainability goals. That's how we assess the project. And I do recommend that if you're not a member, join it. It doesn't hurt, and it can help a lot. We're working in a set of global assumptions for the year 2050. And the global assumptions are profound. There could be billions of people in the world moving, billions, between now and 2050 because of drying of the middle equatorial hot dry zones. And that includes America, Africa, India, parts of China. It's very serious. We've identified 157 innovations. Each of them has a website location on the Collaborative's website. And we've published a book of the initial studies, and there are many of you have seen the book already, but some of you don't. They're all on the website, and they're all from many important universities. And now I'm finished with that part of the introduction. Now what I want to do is turn it over to Michele, who's going to describe the study area and how we've organized the teams. Realize, however, that you're going to be getting both the video of Michele's introduction and my slides, which are what he's using, immediately after the workshop. So you don't have to take notes, just realize how complicated this project is beginning to take on it's beginning to take on its complexities. Michele, it's yours. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, I will take the screen. Here it is. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, yes. Make it full screen though.
Okay. So, welcome to the study area. This is the southern part of Sardinia. And you can see on the left the metropolitan city of Cagliari, which includes Cagliari as a main center, and other 16 municipalities. The metropolitan city was established 4 years ago for the first time. So these over all 17 municipalities never really worked together. And for the first time now they have to create a comprehensive integrated plan. On the left, you can see the land uses, the existing land uses, which are in the dark green up to the mountain, to the east and to the west. You have forest land. Then you have the major conurbation with Cagliari and some other surrounding smaller town, in brown and in yellow, depending on the density. And Cagliari, the main conurbation, is surrounded by two quite big wetlands. To the west, there is the Santa Gila Lagoon, and to the east, the Molentargius pond. This is a national park. Actually, it is protected. And in purple, you can see the industrial areas. There is a main one near the big lagoon. Another one, a big oil refinery in the southwest, and some smaller one in the main, along the main axis, the main highway going to the north of the island from the city of Cagliari. And most of the other land is agricultural land in light green. And of course, Cagliari is on the sea and surrounded by the Mediterranean to the south. This picture tries to evoke a little bit the character of this area. The area was inhabited since 3,000 years ago, Bronze Age. Then the area was the Phoenician. Cagliari had a Phoenician town, a Roman town. And then we had the Spanish domination in the Middle Ages. So there is a very long history, a lot, very big, rich heritage, and tradition are well preserved as well. Some of you may know that Sardinia is very popular for the beauty of its coastal landscape, and the beaches, very nice beaches. And this is the main attraction for tourism. However, tourism is not as intense in other Mediterranean destinations, such as in Italy mainland or Spain or Greece. Still, it is one of the main economic sector for the island. The overall population of the island, the size is about 24,000 square kilometers, and the overall population is 1.5 million, so it's very low density. And 430,000 people live in the metropolitan city of Cagliari. As I show in the land use map, there is a big part of the land devoted to agriculture. This is not modern industrial agriculture, it's really kind of traditional agriculture. Most of the production is what we call now bio. In some city in Europe we spend a lot for. Still, there is a lot of availability here and for cheap. And this is local, so we eat local product. This is pretty much the same with fishery. This is just to say that people, the local community, love genuine food, and this is also part of their attractiveness for tourism. In addition to that, Cagliari is a hosting town of the first European public internet service provider back in the beginning of the 2000s, late 90s. And so this made Cagliari as one of the major poles in innovation in ICT in Italy. It's a small size, but still quite advanced. So continuing fostering the development in this sector is seen as a major objective in the area. So with this little introduction, based on this consideration, we identified 10 systems to work on. Water infrastructure. Actually, all Sardinia is affected by drought, and since several decades. So this is a problem, and we want to improve water infrastructure. And due to climate change, is also sometimes prone to flooding, and we need to address this. Then we have the agriculture system, the green infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, transportation, industry and commerce, institutional services and smart facilities. This is to support the further development in the ICT advanced industry. Low density housing, mixed use, including high density housing plus service and commerce, and cultural heritage. This is an important resource to be preserved in the area. And for each of the system, we kind of forecast the needed amount in hectares that we need to develop in the next 20 years. And the diagram that Carl showed already make it the proportion of the amount of land for each system we need to develop compared to the overall study area, to give you an idea. Quite a lot for agriculture, quite a lot for green infrastructure and water, and less for urban land uses. And when we think about development in the next 20 years for the area, according to the IGC approach, we want to introduce, oh, Christina is coming.
Good.
And we want to use technology innovation to design for the development. And within the IGC, the original group collected quite a huge number of technology innovation we can use in each of the IGC system. And we selected the list you see in the slide that basically are those technology innovation that we believe are most appropriate in the study area. So you can choose from the list when you will be proposing your project diagrams, or also you may refer to the IGC website for a broader list that if you want, you may want to have a look at the broader list to put things in context. For each of the system, we prepared an evaluation map, applying the legend, the classification that basically Carl already explained. And I will show you now the example in the evaluation map. This is water infrastructure. We don't have the red here because basically we consider water a system that almost anywhere can be developed. And the major objective here is to protect flood-prone areas, which basically are those in darker green. And you can see there is a big one inside the city where those are maybe more harmful, but also there are some other outside the city. The medium green basically represent water bodies, river, the wetlands, and this is where we would suggest mostly to think about of creating a blue infrastructure. And the yellow is basically where you have artificial land uses and basically there is no resources or no opportunities for development. So the main objective here are to address flood risk and to protect water bodies and develop blue infrastructure. This is the evaluation map for agriculture. In the yellow, you see that not appropriate, meaning artificial land uses, and also the forest land and where the slope is very steep. All the rest is basically good for agriculture, but you can see in darker green the areas with a better soil and better condition for more successful production. And we want basically to transform, to develop agriculture in the sense, some of these areas are in green are already agricultural land, but we want to improve let's say the way of production, introducing technology so that we can use less water and basically we can monitor our crop and possibly become more productive. Beside that, as a complementary action, we want also to develop agri-tourism, sustainable tourism relating to the agricultural activity. This is already a reality, a small reality in the island. It was proven successful in the past, and we want to invest more in this. This is the green infrastructure evaluation map. You can observe the existing and working well, the big red patches, basically the forest areas in the mountain surrounding the metropolitan city, and the two big wetlands. And basically here we want to extend the green infrastructure and connect the patches, basically following the green, again, the darker, the more suitable or feasible. And the yellow basically are the artificial land use, where at this scale, it is not really meaningful to think about developing green infrastructure. And so we want to preserve natural areas and connect natural areas mostly. And this is also related to cultural heritage in a way. I will talk about that later. Energy infrastructure, basically you see the red spot are the existing production and transformation plant. And in the green again, you can find areas where you can work to develop more green production, energy production mostly. Transportation. In transportation, you can observe the linear infrastructure. These are mostly road infrastructure in the area. And some of them are red, meaning that the level of, they are pretty new, well maintained, and the levels of service compared to the demand is pretty good. While when the road infrastructure is dark green, it means that the road is existing, but the level of service and the maintenance is bad. So probably this is where we need some action. And with the transportation system, mostly we want to create a big ring road to enhance connectivity in the area. And also we may think about developing in terms of soft mobility, like cycling path, connecting different areas. And as a third option, also we can think also about developing a metro line, maybe to reach some areas a little bit that at the moment are not very well served. Industry and commerce, we have two major heavy industry areas near the lagoon on the west, center west, and the big oil refinery on the coast in the southwest. And then we have smaller light industry and commerce activities along the main axis going towards the north of the island, and some smaller scattered artisanal or light industry areas around and within sometimes the main conurbation. Within is more commerce, around is more logistics and light industry and handicraft. So also in the case of industry, as well as in agriculture, we don't basically want to grow quantitatively, but better kind of improve the quality of the production, maybe change a little bit, and introduce innovation in terms of technology. Institution and smart services, you can see mostly in the red is represented by the university campus, surrounded by other research center. There is also another big public research center down in the southwest. And basically here we want to make a little bit maybe more balanced development, and maybe creating one new major research center that can also create a little bit of balanced network in the areas. And maybe also to create a little bit of institution and public service outside the city, because at the moment, most of the public services are within the city and people need to go there to, you know, in order to do some kind of procedure. Lower density housing. Basically, there is not much space left. If we you see a lot of we have a lot of yellow areas here. Some of the yellow is yellow because it's already high density, so it's not easy to turn it to low density. Some part of it is as a physical limitation, either too steep, either is natural protected land. So actually there are only few areas in green that can absorb and host new lower density housing development. And this actually is quite interesting, because when you change scale from the local land use planning scale to the metropolitan city scale, you start observing this. Traditionally, there was not such thing as intermunicipal or regional planning in Sardinia. So the local people, the local mayors, in the tradition, the local culture is to look inside the municipal boundary. And each of the mayor want to build new residential low density expansion. But if you look at this scale of the problem, not all the municipality might have the opportunities to develop further lower density housing. So this is quite interesting in the area. Higher density housing, it is already present in the city center of Cagliari, a little bit in the surrounding smaller town. And so this is very concentrated, and probably a little bit of balancing special equity here is probably an issue. And so we want to find some new areas for high density housing, probably outside the main conurbation. And last but not least, you can see here the cultural heritage map. The green area basically are the areas where there is the highest density or higher density of archaeological sites. Some of them in red are well maintained. This can be, for example, the old Roman town of Pula in the southwest, but also the Cagliari Historic City Center. And we have other smaller city centers. Most of the town in the area as a city center that is quite old, date back 3 or 4 centuries. So all the town have a city center, but they are red because they have already in place historic center redevelopment plan. So we want to preserve the heritage outside the town center, mostly along the coast, and basically improve accessibility. So preservation and accessibility to cultural heritage is seen as a very important issue. And of course, cultural heritage can be seen also in relationship with green infrastructure, because they can work together to provide a broader set of ecosystem services. So now let's talk a little bit about the teams. All of you will be part of a team, and we have 8 teams. 4 teams are global or regional. This means that they are concerned with the whole area in terms of development, while the last 4 are local teams. And you can see the boundary in the map on the right. The metro team basically is the metropolitan authority, and the major objective of this team is that, you can find a note on the bottom of the slide, is mostly a well spatially balanced sustainable development. And particularly they are focusing on improving the transportation network, water and the energy infrastructure, and they want to promote sustainable tourism as well, because this is seen in the island. While industry will never grow that much probably, and agriculture in a way is also stable, we want to improve this, but mostly using technology. But tourism is definitely a major resource for the economy in the island. And we are actually realizing more than ever now with the pandemic and the reduction of tourism that we are suffering economically pretty much in the area. The developers, also a regional team, of course, want to push economy and investing mostly in housing, industry, smart infrastructure, and tourism. And of course, the tourism, the developers might be different from the tourism model seen by the metro and other groups. The green, of course, want to improve sustainability of the environment, or to improve conservation and protection of natural and cultural resources. And they also want to promote tourism, but probably a more light and sustainable tourism, and water infrastructure as well, that actually works well with green infrastructure. The farmers, again, want to improve the production, the way of production, and still conserving the genuinity of the local product. And they want to also to promote agri-food and tourism related to agriculture. And then we go to the local teams. Cagliari. Cagliari is the capital city in history, and nowadays still is the capital city of the island, and is a major center in the metropolitan city. And they want to maintain this leading role for the capital city. The southern east municipalities, led by the municipality of Quartus Sant'Elena along the coast, basically they have a major problem. In Quartus Sant'Elena, quite big territory, the biggest municipality in this group in terms of population, almost 100,000, as a city center close to Cagliari, but has also extensive development, low density development on the coast, along the beaches. And this development was never really planned. So just grow up in the last 3 or 4 decades, but in a very unorganized way. Residential basic infrastructure are quite poor. Some areas here, lack of sewage, and also transportation connectivity is not very good. So they have a big problem of requalification of the urban settlement, low density settlement on the coast. And they have also nice beaches, so they want to improve tourism, and they also have cultural heritage and quite good agriculture production in the backyard. And then you go up to the mountain where you have basically natural land and forest, part of which should be protected, part of which is working well, part of which should be still protected, taken care of. If we go to the northwest, we have near the lagoon, bordering the lagoon, we have the biggest industrial area in the metropolitan city. And in the backyard, it is mostly agricultural land. So this is where the biggest major quantity of agricultural land is located. There are not so many services, so they want to attract a little bit of the services from the city. And also they want to develop a little bit of housing serving industrial and agricultural activities. And last but not least, we have the southern western part. In this part, we have big part of it is mountainous areas with forest, but down to the coast, we have the big oil refinery. We have a lot of agricultural heritage, and we have a very high quality compared to the other agricultural land, very high quality agriculture production. The tomato from Pula are well known in all the island and possibly in Italy, and they cost to the customer twice as much as the regular tomato. So they have this specific production here, and this is also the longer and probably most crowded tourist area. All the southern coast has second houses as well as very nice hotel. There is a very big Forte Hotel Resort with more than 1,000 beds, and this resort actually is worldwide award-winning resort. So they have also very specific tourist vocation, and they want to improve all of these vocation. Okay, so I think I'm done with the description, and I give the floor back to Carl.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Jennifer, did you get my response to your question? No, I wrote it, it didn't get sent. The slide is very, very clear, and you'll get the slide 10 minutes after we end. And I can explain it more if you email me afterwards. Okay, I need to share my screen, and
Back to Zoom.
I need to go back to, just a minute, share screen. I don't see my screen. Hold on a second. I'm going to escape. Let me just look at, I'm going to escape for a minute. Let me see what's on my screen. This is my screen. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. So I need to go back to Zoom. I need to share the screen. Here it is. Now I see it.
Okay, it's coming. Here it is.
Okay, but boy, it went back. Now, this is so stupid. hold on a second. I need to escape. I need to move my cursor down to here, and I need to do this. You can see my screen now, right?
It's perfect.
Okay, so Michele has shown you that he has the data, he's built the process models, he's shown you the evaluation models. And now we're going to begin the process of identifying projects and policies, which we're going to turn into a design, assess the impacts, decide whether it's a good design, and we're going to decide that it's not a good design. This is what we're going to do next week. We're then going to make a second design in which we can change scale. We're going to do a second design. And we may, if we have time, say no and do a third design. But if we don't have time, we'll say that design is good, let's use it, and say yes. And then we're going to put you together with another team, and we're going to say, negotiate your two designs and say yes. Or if we have time, we're going to say no and do a second round of negotiation with another set of teams and a third. But eventually we'll say, look, we've run out of time, let's just stop. So what we're doing now is we're going to look at the beginnings of the software, and I'm going to explain boundaries and how to work with the site evaluation models. And then Rishi is going to take us in the sandbox and teach us how to draw diagrams of policies and projects. And everybody's going to draw at least one or two or three now. Then we're not going to talk about strategies. That's for Wednesday, but you'll see them in the slides. And this is on Wednesday when we're going to talk about the strategies. We're going to make designs. We're going to compare and negotiate designs. We're going to make a final design if we can. We're going to present the designs if we have time. And we're going to stop and look at the history of how the designs developed into a final design. That's what I hope to do in 4 hours, with most of you who being relatively experienced. There's going to be a task for everybody at the end of this session. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to stop, and Michele is going to get us all into the sandbox, which is a mimic of the real project. So Michele, I'm going to now stop I'm going to go in, I'm going to sign off there, cancel. I need to get back into Zoom by minimizing my desktop, get back into Zoom. Why can't I do that?
Could you like to?
I need to stop my sharing.
Okay, I can take it over.
Hey, you take it over and I can get back into Zoom.
Okay.
Okay, now you take over.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to ask you if is there anybody who didn't sign up in GeoDesign Hub? You can use your microphone to answer, maybe. Everybody has a GeoDesign Hub account already? Fantastic.
No, I do not. So
okay, so I will show you how to do it. I just need should have a PowerPoint. It's very simple, few steps. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, if you launch in your browser, either Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox. If you have a Mac, please don't use Safari, because sometimes we have a problem with Safari. Just Firefox or Chrome. And if you go to www.geodesignhub.com, you go to the home page, and you on the upper right, you can click on Login. You go to the second page. On the bottom, you find sign up for a new account. Click there, and you get to the sign up screen. just write your username. Please don't use capital letter or all small letter. You can use your surname if you like, as simple as that. Your email, you set up your password, repeat the password, the CAPTCHA, and you are in. So please do it now. And as when you are done, and for the others, you can find in the chat the link to join the project. The link to join the project, you should cut and paste this link in the browser once you are already logged in the system. And basically, the link for the project is always the same always the same route, www.josephnhub.com/p/join. And the last part, you see 000, is three character code that keep you in the platform. So now I'm going to share my screen again. And now you are seeing my account. In the center, I have a long list of projects. If you are new to GeoDesign Hub, if you haven't used it, if it is the first time you use it, you will have only the IGC Cagliari 2020 Sandbox WS3, okay? And then you can click in it, and you are in the project, okay?
Everybody should do that.
Let's wait just 1 minute or two, and please, anyone, if you have difficulties, let us know. I can see on the top of the page that already some of you are already in, the other will be coming. And if I refresh the page, you can see a blue rectangle appear, and then it becomes green. And this is basically an alert that tells you that the client is syncing with a server. And the data exchange between the client and the server is quite heavy sometimes. So it is good to have this alert to inform you that the client and the server are communicating. In that case, if you see the blue rectangle, maybe you have to wait a few seconds. When it's green, things are ready to work.
Michele, for reasons that I don't understand, my permission has been denied to get into the sandbox.
And let's do like this. First, you open your account in the browser, then you add a new window,
Yeah, I know.
and paste the link.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna do that.
This way, it should work.
Okay, I'll try it, and I'll catch up to you, I hope.
Is there anyone else experiencing problem?
Oh, yes. Did you provide the link somewhere? I'm sorry, I missed that. Is it in the
It is
chat?
in the chat.
Chat window. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
in the chat
Thank you.
window. At the moment, I'm afraid I cannot see the chat window because I'm sharing the screen.
Do we need to change our profile settings for our icon to show up?
No.
Sandbox?
You can do it later. If you want to load your image, your photo, you can do it later. And
Okay.
there are a few other settings you can explore.
Thank you.
So anybody's in? Yeah? Anybody is out, left out?
Just have a quick question. It says currently your project has no brief. Is that okay?
Is that okay? No problem. The brief is just an abstract for the project. We didn't load it, but it's just, you can give some just introduction to the participant when you organize your own workshop.
Okay. Yeah. No worries.
Any other question? Okay. So Carl, you want to start with the boundaries, or I will do it?
I'll start with the boundaries and this, but we're gonna go fast. We're just gonna go fast because of the time. Everybody should, in the sandbox, scroll down to, I want to share my, I need to share my
Please do it, yeah.
screen. So I need to minimize this, get rid of this. Get rid of this. Come on, get back into Zoom. Get back into Zoom. Come on. I'm just having a lot of trouble. London has very difficult email, internet sometimes in the evening. I think my internet is in real trouble. Michele, you should go through the boundaries and the very quick assessment of the
Evaluation maps.
evaluation maps. Don't wait for me because I think I'm having a problem.
Okay, and if you want to say something,
I'll interrupt. I'm having trouble getting back into Zoom.
okay. So basically, Design Hub is a very long web page, bulletin board model, but you can find many objects that are interactive. So you start on the top with boundaries. You can click on it, see the study area, and anytime you click on a tile is an interactive, and you open your browser with different each job browser has a different function. So here you can see the study area. Basically, in this sandbox we set only one boundary, the study area, but in the projects next week you will find also the boundary of the local teams. So the Cagliari, the Southeast, the Northwest, and the Southwest. So this will facilitate your work, especially for the local team. You can integrate other information, satellite background to understand exactly where you are. And we also added some layers for mashup. You can add rivers, roads, settlements. Go back. So you have the base layer that can help you to orient, and you have also existing land uses. So you can check what is there. Okay, this is the first part. And then you may, we didn't in this case, but you may add constraint. Constraint are areas where you will not able to put any design. So they are exclusion areas, but we don't use this. Sometimes you may need it, but not in this case. And then you have the structure here. You go to site evaluation and diagrams. You have the list of evaluation maps, one for each system, and basically they structure the following part of the software because they identify columns in the following diagram matrix. You can click in any maps, navigate, use the background layer as you want, and then you have the explore evaluation, and this allows you basically to overlay all the evaluation maps. So for example, if you think about in terms of development, if you switch on what we have, industry and commerce, mixed institutional and smart services, and you zoom in, basically you can see where in the overlay you have dark green areas and the coherent color. This means that there is competition for uses here. And you can do the same for the natural and conservation uses, systems like agriculture, green infrastructure, water infrastructure, and maybe cultural heritage. And again, you see where there are the resources, the suitable land, and where the possible competition is. You want to add anything on this, Carl?
Show the overlays, the actual set of overlays in the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah, and you can add settlements, existing roads, existing land use if you like, land uses.
And air photograph. The satellite.
And the satellites.
And
okay.
you can zoom in great detail.
If you zoom in, you can, transparency may work a little bit better. Actually, the existing land use layer is a bit covering the rest, but otherwise you can see where you are if you zoom.
Good.
Okay, so having said that, again, remember that we are now reasoning by columns. Each system is a column. So I have the first evaluation map is a low density housing. If I scroll down in the same column, I have one first diagram. This is new single family housing. Again, in the job browser, I can understand where I am. I can zoom in, zoom out, I can pan, understand where I am. So I'm in the eastern part, in the Quarto municipalities here. And if you want to add a new diagram, a new project, you just go on the top, on the bottom of the column, click add, choose project. In the first instance, we will draw one project diagram. When you click, you get a window when you basically have to decide what kind of project you want to do. I want to do a new condos with green roofs. Okay, so here the name must be meaningful not only for you, but also to the other, because if you are proposing a project, you wish that also other may like the project and the project carry on in the process, in the overall design. So you should give a good description. Don't call this new diagram, or don't call this my diagram, but just something that has a semantics that anybody can understand. Then you can choose the type of funding. In this case, I'm an entrepreneur, I want to be condos, and this is private investment, and the condos is typically a polygon, represented as a polygon. You can set the timeline, starting and ending of the project, construction project, if you like. And if you open the optional information, this is quite interesting, you can add the total cost of the project. For example, in this case, I can put 2 million euro. If you don't know, if you have no idea of the cost must just need to be approximate, not really precise, but just the order. But if you have no idea, you can choose per hectare, and this will multiply the area of your diagram for the standard cost for low density housing. When you are done with this attribute of the project, basically you say you click add diagram, and automatically the job browser pop up, and you can see the title of your project, the number in the column, low density housing column number 3, and then you go edit map. You are ready to find the location for your design, for your project. You need to add, switch on in the bottom of the window, the low density housing evaluation map. As you are not familiar with the area, you can trust the evaluation map and look for a dark green. This is the most feasible and the most sensible choice to do. So I found this green area here, or this one. This is connected to the existing settlement. So this is why it's dark green. There are infrastructure, and this probably the market is good. So I can zoom in. I click add feature, and then I start clicking first node, second node, third node, how many node you want. And when you are done, you go back to the first node, and look now, pay attention now. When I click the first node, the color of the diagram change and the dimension appear. So now you know how much area, what is the area of your diagram, okay? This is in square meter. So pretty much this is probably, it's 24 hectares. Maybe it's too big, so I want to reduce it a little bit, and I can modify the shape. Okay.
Let me interrupt you for a minute, Michele.
When I'm done, I click save, and then I can close the window, and I will find my diagram in the right column in the diagram matrix.
Let me interrupt you for a second. The
Please.
software, let me repeat, allows non-metric. We're working in metric because it's international. But if you need to work in acres and in dollars, it's able to convert the whole process into acres and dollars. It's automatic. It's a button that you press when you organize the project. But because we're working internationally and most of the world is metric, we're working in metric. By the way, strangely enough, I taught all the time at Harvard in metric. I made my students who are American work in metric. Some of them have thanked me. Some hate me for that, but that's the way it is. It's really useful to teach your American students to work in metric. The world is working metric. Period.
Okay, so now you can try to build your diagram. Just remember that depending on the meaning of your project, you should choose the right system.
Right?
So if you want to do a road, you go to transport. If you want to do a condos, you go to low density housing. If you want to do industry, you go to industry system, and that's all. And you see the diagram of the same system are all in the same color. So it's very easy to understand that yellow, to memorize that is yellow is low density housing, black is transportation, dark green is green infrastructure, and the like.
Michele, let me add something.
Yeah.
We want everybody to make at least one polygon, which is either a policy, which is a solid color, or a policy which is a hatched color, or a project which is a solid color. And some of you should try to make a linear element, a road. And when you make a linear element, you end it by tapping the last dot in your design twice. That ends the line. And it could be a power line or a highway. And we can buffer those inside GIS, a GIS operation inside. So roads are linear, power lines are linear, water supply systems are linear. Otherwise, it's a polygon. And you should make at least two diagrams. One should either be a policy and a project, and one might be a linear experiment. Now is the time to experiment. So everybody should know how to do that. And we're going to stop in about 5 minutes. And then we're going to show you how to make a design and remove things from a design. So make two diagrams that are in different systems. Don't all use the same system. Diversify.
And I would add that in this workshop, we are going fast and we are all drawing. But in your future project, if you like, you can also upload diagram. If you have a real project file, either shapefile or CAD file, you can convert it and ingest it. If you look at transportation diagram number 1, this is very detailed project. This is not hand drawn. This comes from a CAD file. Okay, so this sometimes may be useful. We don't use this functionality a lot, but in some cases can be useful. I'm exploring now a little bit the names. They all look meaningful.
And you can go into your previous diagram and edit it in several ways if that's what you'd like to do. You should
Another useful information, if you want to delete your own diagram, you can change or delete not the whole tile in the matrix, but the shape of your diagram, yes. So to delete the shape of your diagram, if you are a Windows user, you press Control and then click inside your diagram. It's not working at the moment. Why? That should work usually. And edit map, Control, press, and the diagram disappear, and then you can draw it again. Okay. If you are Apple user, you can you press Command and then click inside the diagram when you are in editing space, and so you can delete a shape of the diagram if you don't like and remake it.
How much you delete a linear feature?
How much?
How might one delete a linear feature?
I believe it is the same way as for the diagram. Not sure. I have to try to test this project. New road.
John, in the sandbox, you can only edit your own diagram. In the real project, you can copy and edit anybody else's diagram.
I see. Thank you.
So I'm just doing a diagram for testing how to delete it. Okay, now I save, I edit again, I press Ctrl and I click. Maybe this doesn't work online, maybe. So in the case of line, but in this case it's easier to just move it. With shape, sometimes it's difficult to modify the shape. With line is probably easier to add nodes and just change it, change the.
Thank you.
Anyway, I will ask Rishi and maybe for the workshop, if it is possible, maybe it's possible also to, apparently it's not. Okay.
All right, how are we doing? Okay.
Good.
Is there anybody who has not made two diagrams yet? All right, Michele, let's make a design.
Okay. For the next when we will meet next time, we will have approximate. We expect to have around 100 projects, about 10-12 lines. So if all of you do your homework properly, and so once we have a rich matrix of diagrams, we start looking at those and select those that we like. To select the diagram, basically you click on the bottom of the tile, it becomes black, it is selected. So now I will just random select some to let you see what happens when you basically you choose your favorite diagram, you select those.
Michele, let's take all of the low density housing.
Okay.
Watch what Michele is doing.
So if you go to the top of the column, you are going to select all the diagram for that column. Okay. And then when I have a selection that is satisfactory to me or the time is gone, you can go down and you see the first synthesis or the first integrated design. So a synthesis basically is a sub-selection of diagram.
Michele,
Yeah.
you see the agricultural area that's the one. I don't think that should be in this design.
So I can click on it, identify which diagram it is, agriculture number 1. So I go up again in the matrix, agriculture number 1, where it is here. I unselect and I go back to the synthesis.
And
It is not there anymore. Okay.
in other words, one button brings any diagram in, and one button brings any diagram out of the design. And one of the most interesting strategies that this process enables, which you almost never do, is you can put all of the diagrams in and make a design by removing bad ideas, as opposed to making a design by putting in good ideas. And sometimes it's better and easier to figure out what's not a good idea than to figure out what's a good idea. And it opens up all kinds of strategies of making a design, which is what we're going to spend a fair amount of time thinking through when we actually do the workshop.
And basically, if you do, as Carl is suggesting, you start from the whole set of diagram, and then you identify conflict, basically to solve conflict. It's much easier because basically you are making everybody's happy, and you have just to solve the worst conflict and eliminate the worst ideas.
For example, let's look at what you've just done now. Put in the existing land use. Oh, well, we see somebody has put a road not only through the lagoon, but through the city. So we can see that there are some adjustments that need to be made. And so we don't need to necessarily talk about it until we see what's being proposed to say, oh, look, that one looks promising. Maybe we can adjust it a little bit. Let's take that one, figure out which it is by putting our cursor on it and simplifying the task.
Transportation number 6. And another comment on this diagram, this is a little bit too complex. So maybe I want to eliminate just this ring that crossed the lagoon and the city and save the rest. So in this case, it's better to make just one line per diagram or just simpler shape. And if you have polygons, just one polygon per diagram, not multiple or compound polygons.
This is a rule that we're imposing. Only one polygon per diagram, only one linear element per diagram. No compound diagrams. Don't make compound diagrams because they need to be redrawn every time somebody wants to only use part of it. Okay, so that little exercise is useful very, very often. So it's a very simple exercise, but when it's multiplied many times by many people, it becomes an extremely complicated process using very simple diagrams. That's what we're going to be working with. Now, I need to share my screen again.
Please go.
Michele.
And I'm copying the real project link in the chat now.
No, don't do that. Don't do that yet. I'll do that. I'll do that in a minute. Okay. Michele, let me share my screen.
Please go. Yeah.
Okay. Where the hell is the thing that I want to see? It's this one, but it's in the wrong place.
Okay. We have the PowerPoint now.
Can you see?
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So what we're going to be doing between now and Monday at noon, it should take no more than 1 hour, is each team is going to make one diagram in every system. And there are 3 of you in each team. So it's a task that can be divided and each person makes 3, somebody makes 4 diagrams, and everybody's going to be happy. We're going to then be discussing, we're going to come next time and discuss strategies. Strategies that allow a design to be made efficiently. And these can be combined. We're going to be making designs, comparing and negotiating designs, presenting designs, and looking at their history. It's going to take 4 hours, maybe 4.5, especially if we take a short break. So plan on 4 hours to 4.5. It will not take more than 4.5 hours, but we will begin exactly on time. And this is the task that every team needs to deal with. Let me explain it really slowly. And after this, I'm going to put the slide of the teams on, and Michele is going to connect you into the real project. My advice would be practice in the sandbox, but when you make your designs in the real project, they really have to be as a reasonable, believable design diagram. The initial aim is not to make a design, but rather to produce a diverse set of ideas from which a design will emerge in several iterations. This is really important. The team is not meeting to make a design. The team is making ideas that could come from individual offices, individual people, and they're selective, system-oriented. It's as though you have 50 people that you're talking to. Nobody has the whole design, but everybody has a little piece of it. That's the position you need to place yourself in. For every system, each team, there are 8 teams. They're numbered. Your number is related to the team that Michele assigned you, teams 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Each team must make at least one diagram of a policy or a project which you see in your team interest. No diagram should exceed the target size for that system, which is in the PowerPoint. The diagram should not be compound. It should have only one polygon or linear element. It should be labeled in a concise content description. If the diagram represents an IGC innovation, policy or project, please add the system innovation code, for example, linear forested corridor link, green 1, to the name, so we know that you're interested in an innovative policy. When this meeting is finished, you will have signed into the project, the real project. The coordinator of the team will organize a separate meeting on Zoom or Skype and decide how to proceed. And how to proceed means, most importantly, deciding who makes which diagram in which system in the real project. And I highly recommend that you decentralize that task. Ask people what they are interested in most, prefer, but then you have to deal with every system with at least one diagram, because your design in the end has to have every system by its targets in the design. You have to make them as you've been instructed and have them saved in the real project by Monday. I'm sorry, why did that advance? By Monday, coming Monday, at noon London time. At noon London time. Then join the workshop when it's scheduled, about 20 minutes before the start time, in order to join GeoDesign Hub again. And it frequently happens, I need to warn you of this, it frequently happens that one or two people might drop out for all kinds of appropriate or possibly less appropriate reasons. And it's possible that we may have to reorganize some of the teams. And if you know, for whatever reason, I don't need to know the reason, that you cannot attend the workshop, please inform me as soon as possible, as soon as you know, because I can place somebody else in your team, or we can reorganize. But if you simply disappear, then there's a problem. And it's a problem for me and for your teammates. And we know who disappears. But it's best if you let us know. Now, the most important thing is for Michele to put you into the project and for us to answer any last-minute questions before we end this workshop, which we hope to do in a few minutes, as agreed in the beginning. So Michele, I'm going to stop. I will send you this email as soon as I'll send you the link to the PowerPoint as soon as the meeting is over. Okay, Michele, why don't you?
I just copied the link for the real project in the chat, so please cut and paste it and save it. You can join the real project now. And again, if you want to practice a little bit, please use the sandbox. And when you are ready with your ideas for the project, so you can go in the real project according to the agreement you made with the other team members, and just save the diagram in the real project.
If there are any questions after the workshop, send them to me to keep. Michele is still teaching, so Michele is busy. Send any questions back to me. I'll pass them on to Michele or Arishi as needed. I can probably answer most of them. But it is important that the teams get together, get themselves minimally organized, at least to the level of who's making which diagram, because you'll have time to meet before the workshop when we get together next week at the time that's scheduled. Are there any questions now?
Yeah, there is
are-
one.
yeah.
Carl, could you please clarify the difference between policy and project?
Yes. A policy is something like a regulation or a common practice or a tradition that regulates projects. It's not something that gets directly built. It might prevent building. It might guide building. A project is assumed to be something that is physically changing. It could be planting trees. It could be building a building. It could be building a reservoir. But it's a physical change to the environment which has tangible, visible impacts. Whereas a policy has indirect impacts by altering what projects might get built and where and how. So one is like a law and one is like a construction. And they look differently. They're in the same color for the system, but a policy has parallel lines and a solid diagram is assumed to be the language of a project. Julia, did you have a question?
There is another question. What is the information about the dimension area of projects? For
There-
example, in group 4 related to farming.
It's all this, all the designs have exactly the same targets. All of the design teams have exactly the same targets, but a different client. A different client. The numbers are in two places. One is in the PowerPoint, which you'll all get, and one is just below the design where there's a bar chart that shows the target and the amount that you've made in the design. And it's just below the design in both the sandbox and in the real project. So it keeps track of all of your diagrams. The question that you should really ask me is one I'll answer now. What's the difference between the coordinator and the rest of the team? The reason that there's a coordinator is not to be the commander-in-chief or the dictator, but to give one person on each team the responsibility for saving the design. Because if everybody saves designs, there's going to be a multiplication of whose design is the official design for the team. So the coordinator is the one who imports everybody else's work, which we will demonstrate at the very beginning of the workshop. So the coordinator can say, Dan, you're the coordinator, so you can tell your teammate, let's make believe it's Daniel. Daniel, why don't you figure out where the ring road should be? Let me know when you're done and I'll import it into the design and then you'll see how the whole design fits together. So the coordinator coordinates the design, and then when everybody is satisfied in the team, he saves it or she saves it for the team and they make their next iteration because we're going to make several iterations of the design. You'll see that. The average team will make 3 of them, 4 of them maybe. So it's not a powerful position, but it's a bureaucratic position which is absolutely necessary. That's the only difference. So we've asked the coordinators to phone everybody, to email everybody, pick a time to meet, get your meeting done, get to know each other, and then meet again in the beginning of the workshop where we're going to give more time for you to decide on what your real strategy is on how to attack the problem after I give an introduction. Any other questions? All right. In that case, have a good weekend, but by all means, please have your diagrams in the real project by my time in London, noon on Monday. Because at that time, Michele and I during the week have to look at them and be able to make comments on which ones we know are not going to be feasible. And we're going to be doing that as a favor to you to make the workshop much more interesting, I hope. Any other questions? Michele, is there anybody who's having difficulty getting into the real project? It's the same process. Paste it in and you'll see it looks exactly the same, but this time, every time you make a diagram, it counts. So making them as good as reasonable, most of you are experienced, it's not a big complicated problem. Make them as good as you can, knowing that they'll be edited during the process and knowing some of them will be improved by other people as well.
And also, Carl, you send the list of the teams to everybody, right?
Everybody has the list of teams, but I can put it on my computer now if you want me to share again. I can do that. Share design, design workshop.
No,
Hey, Carl and Michele, only one of my teammates was here. The other one I don't think was here. Should I reach out to them to?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, if that person doesn't answer or decides that he or she can't be in it, I need to know it, and I'll either find you another teammate or we'll take one of the people who's the fourth person on one team and move them into your team, and I'll do all the social contact if you find that circumstance. So my screen is now showing the Americas teams. And by now, everybody should know the teams are numbered exactly like the PowerPoint numbers of the teams. So the Metro team is number 1. The developers are number 2. Jennifer Swift's team is the developers. Chico's team is the green team. Dan Meehan's team is the farmers.
And maybe another info that was asked to me, but maybe is of interest for everybody. The targets are for the whole region.
That's
So
right.
even the local teams should think also outside their own sub-region.
The issue with the local teams is they may want some, but not all of these, but they have to figure out where the rest that they don't want have to go. In other words, if you're central colliery, there's no way that you're going to put all that agriculture. It's bigger than the city itself. But you still have to figure out who's going to get the agriculture and where you think, from Colliery's perspective, it should go. Any other questions? Okay,
Another question in the chat.
I'm sorry, Michele.
There are no other questions in the chat.
In that case, have a very good weekend, and we'll see you all next week. Chico, nice to see you. Glad you could make it. Christina, same to you. And very good. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next week. Anybody who has any further questions, just email them to me. I'll try to answer them as best I can. The meeting is now ended. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Everybody.